Marcus Rivera adjusted his Italian leather tie as his black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. At 35, he had everything most people dreamed of. His tech company had made him millions. His penthouse overlooked the city. And his name appeared regularly in business magazines. Every Tuesday at exactly 2 p.m. he took the same route to his office after lunch meetings downtown. The driver knew the routine perfectly. Down 5th Street, past the old cathedral, through the business district, then up toward the glass towers where Marcus ruled his empire. It was a route that showcased his success. Expensive shops, high-end restaurants, and gleaming office buildings that reflected his achievement. But today felt different somehow. Marcus stared out the tinted window, watching the familiar scenery pass by. His phone buzzed constantly with messages about stock prices and meeting schedules, but his mind wandered to places he usually kept locked away. Success had a price, and lately he wondered if he had paid too much for it. The car slowed at a red light near the old part of town. This was the section Marcus rarely noticed anymore. The area with older buildings, small family shops, and people who looked like they were struggling to make ends meet. His world of boardrooms and luxury seemed so far removed from this reality. That's when he saw her. Sitting on the sidewalk near a closed bookstore was a woman with 2 small children. She was thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days, and holding a cardboard sign that Marcus couldn't quite read from the car window. The children, who looked like twins, were maybe 3 years old. They sat quietly beside their mother, sharing what appeared to be a single sandwich. Something about the woman's profile made Marcus's heart skip a beat. Even from a distance, even though years had passed and life had clearly been harsh to her, he recognized something familiar. The way she tucked her dark hair behind her ear. The gentle way she spoke to the children. The curve of her shoulders when she leaned down to them. "Stop the car," Marcus said suddenly. His driver, James, looked in the rearview mirror with surprise. "Sir, we'll be late for your 3 o'clock meeting. Stop the car, now." James pulled over to the side of the road, about 50 feet from where the woman sat with her children. Marcus's hands were shaking as he reached for the door handle. It couldn't be her. It had been almost 5 years. She was supposed to be living her dream, married to someone who could give her the simple life she wanted. Not this. Never this. But as he stepped out of the Mercedes and walked closer, there was no denying what he saw. The woman was Elena Santos, the woman he had loved more than anything in the world, the woman he had lost because he chose his ambition over their relationship, the woman who had begged him to choose love over money, and who had walked away when he refused to listen. Elena looked up as his shadow fell across her and the children. For a moment, time stopped completely. Her brown eyes, the same ones that had looked at him with such love 5 years ago, now showed shock, then embarrassment, then a deep sadness that cut through Marcus like a knife. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the street noise. The 2 children looked up at this tall man in the expensive suit who had made their mother react so strangely. They were beautiful kids with Elena's eyes and dark hair. The little girl had a toy rabbit that was missing an ear, and the little boy clutched a small book with torn pages. They looked healthy despite their circumstances, which told Marcus that Elena was probably giving them everything she had. "Elena, Marcus started, then stopped. What could he say? What words could possibly bridge the gap between his world of luxury and her reality of struggle? His throat felt tight, and his usual confidence had completely disappeared. People walking by glanced at the strange scene. A millionaire in a $1,000 suit standing frozen in front of a homeless woman and her children. Some recognized Marcus from newspaper photos and whispered to each other, but Marcus didn't notice any of them. All he could see was the woman he had never stopped loving, sitting on a sidewalk with 2 children who looked exactly like her. Elena stood up slowly, brushing dust off her worn jeans. She was still beautiful, even though life had clearly been difficult. Her face showed the kind of tiredness that comes from worrying about where the next meal will come from, but her eyes, still, held the kindness that had first made Marcus fall in love with her. "These are my children," she said quietly, placing protective hands on each child's shoulder. Maria and Diego. The names hit Marcus like physical blows. Elena had always talked about wanting children, had dreamed about the family they might have together someday. Now here she was, alone with 2 kids, sitting on a street corner asking strangers for help. Marcus looked down at Maria and Diego, and something inside his chest cracked open. They were probably about the right age. Could they be? No, he told himself. It had been 5 years since Elena left. These children looked younger than that, but the timing was close enough to make him wonder, and the wondering made his head spin. Elena, how did you, where have you been? I thought you were married. I thought you were happy. The words came out in a rush, sounding pathetic even to his own ears. Elena's laugh was bitter and sad. A lot has happened since I walked out of your office that day, Marcus. Life doesn't always go according to plan. Behind them, James sat in the Mercedes with the engine running, occasionally checking his watch. Marcus's phone kept buzzing in his pocket, probably his assistant wondering where he was for his important meeting. But for the first time in years, Marcus didn't care about meetings or phone calls or business deals. All he could think about was the woman in front of him and how wrong everything had gone. The silence stretched between them like an invisible wall. Marcus could hear his heart beating in his ears as he struggled to process what he was seeing. Elena, his Elena, was homeless. The woman who had once planned flower gardens for their future home was now sitting on concrete with her children, asking strangers for money. "Mommy, I'm thirsty," little Maria said, tugging at Elena's shirt. Her voice was small and sweet, exactly the kind of voice Marcus had imagined when he and Elena used to talk about having children together. Elena immediately reached into a small backpack and pulled out a water bottle that was clearly being rationed. She gave Maria a small sip, then offered the same to Diego. Marcus watched this simple act of motherly love and felt something break inside his chest. "Here, let me." Marcus started reaching for his wallet, but Elena held up her hand. "Don't," she said firmly. "Not like that. Not out of pity." "It's not pity, Elena. It's—" He paused, looking for the right words. "How long have you been living like this?" Elena glanced at her children, then back at Marcus. 6 months. We had an apartment until the factory where I worked closed down. Then we had a motel room until the money ran out. Now we have each other, and that has to be enough." Marcus felt sick. While he had been buying his 3rd luxury car and investing in art he didn't even look at, Elena had been losing her home. While he had been celebrating another $1 million deal, she had been figuring out how to feed her children. "The father?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Gone," Elena said simply. "Left when things got hard. Some people do that." There was no accusation in her voice, but Marcus felt the weight of her words anyway. He had left too, in his own way. He had chosen money and success over love and family. Diego stood up and walked over to Marcus, looking up at him with curious eyes. "Are you the man from Mommy's pictures?" Elena's face went red. "Diego, come back here." But the little boy stayed, where he was, studying Marcus's face. "Mommy keeps a picture in her book. She looks at it sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping. Are you Marcus?" The world seemed to tilt sideways. Elena still had his picture. After everything that had happened, after he had chosen his business over their relationship, after she had walked away and built a life without him, she still kept his picture. Marcus knelt down to Diego's level. Up close, he could see that the boy had Elena's nose and mouth, but his eyes were a different shape, familiar somehow. "What else does your mommy tell you about Marcus?" "That he was someone special who made different choices," Diego said with the honesty that only small children possess. "She says sometimes people love each other but can't be together because they want different things." Elena was crying now, silent tears that she quickly wiped away. "Diego, that's enough. Come here." But Marcus was studying Diego's face more carefully now, and Maria's too. They were beautiful children, clearly loved and well cared for despite their difficult circumstances. but there was something about their features, something that made his breath catch in his throat. "Elena," he said quietly, standing up again. "How old are they?" "4," she answered, not meeting his eyes. Marcus did the math quickly in his head. 4 years old. That meant they had been born about a year after Elena left him. The timing was possible, but barely. He wanted to ask more questions, but this wasn't the time or place. People were starting to notice the scene. A rich man in a suit talking to a homeless woman and her children. Some had pulled out their phones to record. "We need to get you out of here," Marcus said. "All of you. Let me help." "I told you. I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's—" Marcus searched for the right word. "It's what people do for each other. What I should have done a long time ago." Elena looked at her children, then at the growing crowd of curious onlookers. Maria was getting scared by all the attention and had started clinging to Elena's leg. Diego was still staring at Marcus with that unnerving intensity that children sometimes have. "Just for today," Elena said finally. "Just until we figure out what's next." Marcus nodded quickly, afraid she would change her mind. He walked back to his Mercedes where James was waiting with obvious confusion on his face. "James, we're going to have some passengers." "Sir?" "The woman and her children. We're taking them home." James had worked for Marcus for 3 years and had never seen his boss act like this, but he was a professional and he simply nodded and got out to open the back doors. Elena hesitated at the car. It was beautiful and expensive. Everything she had once thought didn't matter, but now represented a world she couldn't afford to be part of. "Marcus, I don't think—" "Please," Marcus said, and there was something desperate in his voice that made Elena look at him closely. "Just let me do this one thing right." She picked up Maria while Diego climbed into the car by himself. The leather seats were soft and clean, so different from the hard concrete they had been sitting on. Maria immediately curled up next to Elena, while Diego pressed his face to the window to watch the city go by. As James drove them through the wealthy part of town toward Marcus's penthouse, Elena stared at the familiar buildings. This was the world Marcus had chosen over her. These gleaming towers and expensive shops were what he had decided was more important than their love. But now, sitting in his car with her children, she wondered if he was happy with his choice. He looked successful, certainly. His suit probably cost more than she used to make in a month. His car was worth more than most people's houses. But there was something in his eyes, something sad and empty that hadn't been there 5 years ago. "Are you happy, Marcus?" she asked quietly while the children looked out the windows. The question hit him like a physical blow. Happy? He had everything he thought he wanted. Money, success, recognition, power. He had achieved every goal he had set for himself when he was young and hungry and desperate to prove himself. But sitting next to Elena in the back of his Mercedes, watching her children marvel at the luxury around them, Marcus realized he couldn't remember the last time he had actually felt happy. Satisfied, yes. Proud sometimes, but happy. The kind of deep, warm happiness he had felt when Elena used to laugh at his jokes or fall asleep in his arms. No, he hadn't felt that in years. "I thought I was," he said finally. "I had convinced myself that success was the same thing as happiness. And now?" Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time since he had gotten in the car, despite everything she had been through, despite the struggles and the hardship, there was still something peaceful about Elena. Something content in a way he had never achieved, despite all his money. "Now I think I've been lying to myself for 5 years. Marcus's penthouse apartment took up the entire top floor of one of the city's most exclusive buildings. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city skyline, and the modern furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was perfect, expensive, and cold. Elena stood in the marble entryway holding Maria's hand while Diego pressed his nose against the huge windows. Her children had never seen anything like this place. It was bigger than any home they had ever lived in, and probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. "This is where you live?" Elena asked, looking around at the spotless rooms that showed no signs of actually being lived in. "Yes," Marcus said, suddenly feeling embarrassed by the obvious display of wealth. I know it's a lot. I bought it because I could, not because I needed it. Maria whispered something to Elena in Spanish. Elena smiled for the first time since Marcus had found them on the street. She wants to know if you live in a castle. What did you tell her? I told her that sometimes people build castles around themselves to feel safe, but they end up feeling alone instead. The words stung because they were true. Marcus had built this entire life as a fortress against the world, against failure, against the kind of heartbreak Elena had caused when she left. But somewhere along the way he had locked himself inside it. Are you hungry? Marcus asked the children. I can order some food. Diego nodded eagerly, but Maria shyly hid behind Elena's legs. She wasn't used to strangers, especially wealthy, strangers who lived in places that felt like museums. Marcus ordered pizza, thinking it would be something the children would enjoy. While they waited, Elena helped the kids wash their hands in one of his marble bathrooms. Marcus could hear Elena explaining to them that they needed to be careful with the nice things, that this wasn't their home. When the food arrived, they sat around Marcus's dining room table that could seat 12 people. It was the first time Marcus had used it for an actual meal since he had bought the apartment. Usually he ate business lunches at restaurants or grabbed something quick at his office. Diego ate 3 slices of pizza, clearly hungry in a way that made Marcus's stomach hurt. Maria was more careful, eating slowly and saving half of her slice. Elena noticed and gently encouraged her to eat more. It's okay, baby girl, Elena said softly. There's plenty tonight. The word tonight hung in the air like a question. What about tomorrow? What about next week? Marcus wanted to promise that there would always be plenty, but he knew Elena wouldn't accept that kind of help from him. After dinner, the children explored the apartment while Elena and Marcus sat in his living room. The awkwardness between them was thick, filled with 5 years of unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Tell me what happened, Marcus said. After you left, I tried to find you, but you had disappeared. Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching her children play with some books they had found on Marcus's coffee table. I went to my sister's house in Phoenix. I needed to get away from everything that reminded me of us. I was hurt and angry, and I thought a fresh start would help. And then, I got a job at a restaurant. Nothing fancy, but it was honest work. I met someone there, another server named Carlos. He was kind and funny, and he didn't care about building an empire. He just wanted a simple life. Marcus felt a stab of jealousy, even though he had no right to it. You married him? Yes. Too quickly, probably. I was trying to prove to myself that I could be happy with someone who wanted the same things I did. Someone who would choose love over money. But he left. Elena's laugh was bitter. It turns out that choosing love over money is easy when you have enough money to survive. When the factory closed and we couldn't pay rent. When Maria got sick and we couldn't afford the medicine. When we lost the car and then the apartment. Love doesn't keep you warm or feed your children. Marcus wanted to reach over and take her hand, but he didn't know if he had the right. Where is he now? I don't know. He said he was going to look for work in another state. That was 8 months ago. I haven't heard from him since. The pain in her voice was clear, but Marcus sensed. It wasn't just about being abandoned, it was about being wrong. Helena had left him because she believed that love was more important than money, that a simple life with someone who truly cared was better than wealth without heart. But life had taught her a harsh lesson about the reality of poverty. The children, Marcus said carefully. They're his? Elena was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Diego is. And Maria? Elena looked at him then, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else Marcus couldn't identify. What do you think, Marcus? You're a smart man, you can do the math. The room felt like it was spinning. Marcus looked across the living room where Maria was sitting on the floor, carefully looking at pictures in one of his art books. She had Elena's hair and nose, but now that he really looked at her, he could see other familiar features. The shape of her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. the stubborn set of her jaw. "She's mine," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes. You were pregnant when you left. I found out 2 weeks after I walked out of your office. I thought about telling you, but I knew what would happen. You would have married me out of obligation, given her everything money could buy, but you still would have chosen your business first. I didn't want that kind of life for her." Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe. He had a daughter, a beautiful, sweet, shy little girl who was sitting 20 feet away from him, and he hadn't known she existed. "Elena, how could you not tell me? I had a right to know. Did you?" Elena's voice was stronger now, defensive. "The man I fell in love with would have had a right to know. But the man who told me that building his empire was more important than building a family? I wasn't sure that man deserved to know. That's not fair, isn't it? When I told you I wanted us to get married, to start a family, to build a life together, you said you weren't ready. You said your business had to come first for a few more years. You said I was being selfish for wanting more of your time." Marcus remembered that fight. It had been the beginning of the end for them. Elena had been talking about their future, about getting engaged and maybe buying a small house together. But Marcus had just landed his biggest client, and he was working 18-hour days trying to grow his company. The timing had seemed terrible. "I thought I was building something for us," he said weakly. "I thought if I could just get the company stable, if I could just make enough money, then we could have everything we wanted. What I wanted was you, Marcus, not your money, not a big house or expensive cars. I wanted to come home to you at night. I wanted to plan our wedding together. I wanted to have your children while we were young enough to enjoy them. But you always said next year, or when things slow down, or after this next deal." Marcus looked at Maria again, trying to absorb the reality that she was his daughter. 4 years old. He had missed her entire life. Her first words, her first steps, her first day of preschool, all because Elena had been right about him and he had been too proud to admit it. "I would have changed," he said. "If I had known about Maria, I would have made different choices." "Would you?" Elena asked. "Or would you have just hired a nanny and kept working? Would you have missed her bedtime stories because of business dinners? Would you have forgotten her school plays because of important meetings?" Marcus wanted to deny it, but he knew Elena was right. Even now, sitting here with his daughter for the first time, his phone had buzzed 6 times with messages about tomorrow's schedule. His assistant had probably rescheduled 3 meetings already. His first instinct was still to think about his business, even in the middle of the most important conversation of his life. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe you're right. Maybe. I would have been a terrible father back then." "Not terrible," Elena said softly. "Just absent. And Maria deserved better than that." The children had fallen asleep on Marcus's couch, Maria curled up with her worn stuffed rabbit and Diego clutching his little book. They looked so peaceful, so innocent, completely unaware of the complicated adult drama surrounding them. Elena had covered them with a blanket she found in Marcus's linen closet. "They're beautiful," Marcus whispered, standing beside Elena as they watched the sleeping children. "You've done an incredible job with them." "I've tried. It hasn't been easy, especially lately." Elena's voice was tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from months of worry and uncertainty. "They don't deserve this life, Marcus. They deserve stability, good schools, a safe place to sleep every night." Marcus felt the weight of guilt pressing down on him. While his daughter had been living in uncertainty, possibly hungry, definitely, scared about where they would sleep the next night, he had been accumulating wealth he didn't even need. His art collection alone was worth more than most families' entire life savings. "Let me help," he said again. "Let me give them what they need." "And what about what they deserve from their father?" Elena asked quietly. "Money isn't enough, Marcus. Children need more than financial security." "I know that, I do. But I have to start somewhere." Elena turned to look at him, studying his face in the dim light from the city outside. "Do you? Do you really know that? Because 5 years ago you Thought money was the answer to everything. 5 years ago, I was a different person, were you? Or were you just younger and more honest about your priorities? The question hung between them like a challenge. Marcus wanted to insist that he had changed, that success had taught him what really mattered. But looking at his apartment, beautiful, expensive, and completely empty of anything that mattered, he wasn't sure he could prove it. His phone buzzed again on the coffee table. Elena glanced at it, then at Marcus. "Your business is calling." Marcus looked at the phone, then deliberately turned it face down. "It can wait." Can it? Can it really wait? Or are you just saying that because I'm here? Marcus didn't answer immediately because he wasn't sure of the answer himself. His entire adult life had been built around the idea that business came first, that success required sacrifice, that love was a luxury he couldn't afford until he had achieved his goals. But what if he had been wrong about everything? "I want to be different," he said finally. "I want to be the kind of father Maria deserves. The kind of man you thought I could be." "Wanting and being are two different things," Elena said. "Carlos wanted to be a good husband and stepfather too. But when things got hard, when being good required real sacrifice, he left." "I'm not Carlos." "No, you're not. You're the man who chose his company over the woman he claimed to love. You're the man who missed 4 years of his daughter's life because you were too busy building an empire to notice you were building it alone." Each word hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he didn't argue because Elena was right. He had made those choices. He had prioritized his business over their relationship. He had been so focused on creating wealth that he had ignored the real treasures right in front of him. "So what do I do?" he asked. "How do I prove that I've learned from my mistakes?" "You don't prove it to me," Elena said. "You prove it to them." She nodded toward the sleeping children. "You prove it every day with every choice you make. You prove it by showing up, by being present, by putting their needs ahead of your next business deal. And if I fail, what if I'm not capable of being the father they need?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, looking at her children with the fierce love that only mothers know. Then they'll be better off knowing that now than discovering it when they're old enough for it to break their hearts. The honesty in her words was brutal, but necessary. Elena wasn't going to make this easy for him, wasn't going to pretend that good intentions were enough. She had been hurt too badly, had seen too much disappointment to believe in promises without proof. Marcus sat down in the chair across from the couch, watching Maria sleep. She was his daughter, his child. The reality of it was still sinking in like a truth too big to fully comprehend all at once. He had created a human being, a perfect little person with Elena's sweetness and apparently his stubborn determination. "What is she like?" he asked softly. Elena's expression softened as she looked at Maria. "She's cautious, like me. She thinks before she acts, watches before she trusts. She's incredibly kind. She'll give away her last piece of food if she thinks someone else is hungrier. She loves to draw even though we can only afford crayons and recycled paper. And Diego, he's more adventurous, quick to make friends, quick to forgive. He's protective of Maria, even though he's technically younger. He loves stories, any kind of story. He makes up elaborate adventures about the people he sees on the street." Marcus tried to imagine knowing these things about his daughter from experience rather than hearing about them secondhand. He tried to picture bedtime stories and scraped knees and the thousands of tiny moments that make up a childhood. He had missed all of it. "I know I don't have the right to ask this," he said carefully, "but could you stay? Just for a while? Let me try to be part of their lives?" "Marcus, I have a guest room. 2 guest rooms, actually. You and the children would have your own space. No strings attached, no expectations. Just let me try to know them." Elena looked around the apartment again, at the luxury that could solve so many of their immediate problems. A safe place to sleep, reliable meals, warm showers, all the things she had been struggling to provide for her children. "And when you get bored with playing father?" she asked. "When your business needs you more than we do? When being a parent turns out to be harder and messier and more complicated than you thought?" Then I'll have to live with being the kind of man who disappoints his daughter twice, Marcus said. But maybe I won't be. Maybe this is my chance to become the person I should have been all along. Elena was quiet, torn between hope and fear, between the dream of security for her children and the terror of trusting Marcus with their hearts again. She had been wrong about love conquering all when she married Carlos. But maybe she had also been wrong about Marcus being incapable of change. 1 month, she said finally. We'll stay for 1 month. But the first time you choose a business, meeting over Maria's bedtime story, the first time you're too busy to listen when Diego wants to tell you about his day, we leave. And if I don't fail? If I prove that I can be the father they need? Elena looked at him with eyes that held 5 years of hurt and disappointment, but also a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. Then maybe we'll talk about what comes next. Marcus nodded, knowing that 1 month wasn't very long to undo 5 years of wrong choices. But it was a start. It was a chance to meet his daughter, to show Elena that success without love was just an expensive way to be lonely, and to discover if he was capable of being the man he had always claimed he wanted to become. Outside the huge windows, the city sparkled with lights from thousands of windows where families were settling in for the night. For the first time in years, Marcus's apartment didn't feel like a beautiful prison. It felt like it might become a home. The first week was harder than Marcus had expected. He had imagined that being a father would come naturally, that his love for Maria would automatically translate into knowing how to care for her. But parenting, he quickly discovered, was full of small moments that required patience, attention, and skills he had never developed. Maria was shy around him, hiding behind Elena whenever he tried to talk to her. Diego was more open, chattering about everything he saw in the apartment, but even he seemed uncertain about this strange new arrangement. Elena watched every interaction carefully, clearly ready to pack their few belongings and leave if Marcus showed any signs of reverting to his old priorities. On the third morning, Marcus's assistant called during breakfast. It was an important client, she explained, demanding an immediate meeting about a contract worth millions. Marcus could see Elena tense up across the kitchen table, waiting to see what he would choose. Tell Mr. Peterson I'll call him back in 2 hours, Marcus said, not taking his eyes off Maria, who was carefully eating her cereal 1 piece at a time. I'm having breakfast with my family. Elena's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but she didn't say anything. Maria looked up at the word family, studying Marcus with her serious dark eyes. Are you really our family now? Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question hit Marcus in the chest like a physical blow. Here was his daughter, asking the most important question in the world with the innocent directness that only children possess. I'm your father, Marcus said carefully. I know I haven't been here before, but I want to be part of your family now if you'll let me. Maria considered this with the gravity of a judge. Daddy Carlos said he was our family too, but then he left. Elena winced at the mention of her ex-husband, but Marcus felt a surge of anger at the man who had abandoned these beautiful children. I'm different from Carlos, he said. I'm not going anywhere. That's what he said too, Diego piped up, not accusingly, but just as a matter of fact. Marcus looked at Elena, who shrugged slightly as if to say, I told you it wouldn't be easy. The children had been abandoned before. Of course they would be cautious about trusting another father figure who made promises. You're right to be careful, Marcus told them both. Grown-ups sometimes say things they don't mean, but I'm going to prove to you that when I make a promise, I keep it. Over the following days, Marcus started learning the rhythm of family life. He discovered that Maria loved to draw but was frustrated because she only had 3 crayons. He learned that Diego invented elaborate stories about the pigeons on the balcony, giving each one a name and personality. He found out that Elena still hummed the same song she used to sing in the shower, and that she worried constantly about money even though she was trying to hide it from the children. Marcus had his penthouse stocked with art supplies, children's, books, and toys. But he quickly realized that buying things was the easy part. The hard part was being present, being patient, being the steady, reliable presence that children needed. One evening, Maria had a nightmare. She woke up crying, calling for Elena, afraid they were back on the street. Elena comforted her, but Marcus could see how the constant stress was wearing on her. She was exhausted from months of uncertainty, of trying to be strong for her children, while fighting her own fears. "Let me help," Marcus said after Maria had finally gone back to sleep. "You can't buy away her nightmares," Elena replied, but her voice was tired rather than angry. "I know. But maybe I can help her feel safe enough that she has fewer of them." Elena looked at him carefully. "How?" "By being here. By proving that this isn't temporary. By showing her that she has a father who isn't going anywhere. And your business? Your meetings? Your empire that was so important you chose it over love?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city lights that used to represent his success, but now just looked cold and distant. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. What's the point of building an empire if you have no one to share it with?" "Pretty words," Elena said. "But what happens when a big deal comes along? When someone offers you the opportunity of a lifetime? When your empire needs you more than we do?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang. It was his business partner David calling about an emergency. A major investor was threatening to pull out of their biggest project unless Marcus flew to Tokyo immediately for meetings. The deal was worth $50 million, and losing it could set the company back years. Elena watched Marcus's face as he listened to David's urgent explanation. She could see the old Marcus struggling with the new one, the businessman who had built an empire warring with the father who was just beginning to understand what he had missed. "I'll call you back," Marcus said, finally hanging up the phone. "Tokyo?" Elena asked, having heard enough of the conversation to understand. "It can wait," Marcus said, but Elena could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Can it? $50 million? Marcus, that's not pocket change, even for you. It's money. That's all it is. Money I don't even need. But your employees need it. Your company needs it. All those people who depend on you for their jobs." Elena was testing him, pushing him to see if he would choose them again when the pressure was real. Marcus looked toward the bedrooms where Maria and Diego were sleeping. His daughter, who still flinched when he moved too quickly. His stepson, who was beginning to trust him but still waited for him to leave like Carlos had. His family, who needed him to be present more than his company needed him to be in Tokyo. "David can handle it," Marcus said, turning his phone off completely. "He's been wanting more responsibility anyway. This is his chance to prove he can run things without me." Elena stared at him in shock. The Marcus she had known 5 years ago would never have turned down a $50 million deal. He would have been on a plane to Tokyo within hours, promising to make it up to his family later. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure. I spent 5 years building a company that could run without me. Now I'm going to find out if I was successful." That decision marked a turning point. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus began restructuring his entire life. He promoted David to president of the company, giving him real authority to make decisions. He hired additional staff to handle the day-to-day operations that had previously required his personal attention. He moved his office to his home, so he could work while still being present for school pickups and bedtime stories. The changes weren't easy. Marcus had to learn to delegate, to trust other people with decisions he had always made himself. His income dropped as he stepped back from active deal-making, but he discovered he didn't miss the money as much as he thought he would. What he gained was immeasurably more valuable. He was there when Maria finally smiled at one of his jokes. He was present when Diego scraped his knee and needed comfort. He witnessed the small daily miracles of childhood that he had been too busy to notice before. Elena began to relax slightly, though she still watched him carefully for signs that he might revert to his old patterns. She started letting Marcus help with more parental duties, bath time, homework, grocery shopping. She even began to trust him with the children for short periods while she went job hunting. But the real test came on a Saturday afternoon when Maria had a fever. Elena was at a job interview she couldn't reschedule, and Marcus was alone with both children for the first time. Maria was miserable, crying and wanting her mother. Diego was worried about his sister and acting out for attention. Marcus had handled million-dollar crises without breaking a sweat, but nothing had prepared him for a sick 4-year-old who just wanted her mommy. He tried everything: medicine, cool cloths, cartoons, stories. But Maria continued to cry. Finally, he sat down on her bed and began singing a lullaby he dimly remembered from his own childhood. His voice was rough and uncertain, but something about the gentle rhythm seemed to calm her. She stopped crying and looked at him with those serious dark eyes that were so much like his own. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" she whispered. "I'll stay as long as you need me to," Marcus promised. When Elena returned from her interview 2 hours later, she found Marcus still sitting beside Maria's bed, holding his daughter's hand while she slept peacefully. Diego was curled up in the chair nearby, also asleep, a book of stories open on his lap. Elena stood in the doorway watching this scene, the powerful businessman who had chosen money over love now choosing to sit in a child's bedroom, holding vigil over a sick daughter he had only just met. For the first time since she had seen him on that street corner, Elena allowed herself to hope that Marcus Rivera might actually be capable of becoming the man she had once believed he could be. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Elena got offered a job at a small accounting firm. It wasn't much money, but it was honest work with reasonable hours that would allow her to still be present for her children. The night before she was supposed to start, she sat in Marcus's living room after the kids had gone to bed, trying to find the words for what she needed to say. "I got the job," she told him. "That's wonderful," Marcus said, and he meant it. He had seen how important it was for Elena to feel independent, to contribute rather than just accept his help. "You'll be great at it." "It means we can start looking for our own place," Elena continued. "Somewhere small but ours. The kids need stability, and they need to know that our security doesn't depend on your generosity." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had known this moment would come, but he hadn't expected it to hurt so much. "Is that what you want? To leave?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, looking at her hands. "I don't know what I want anymore, Marcus. A month ago I thought I knew. I wanted independence. I wanted to prove that I could take care of my children without depending on anyone else, but now I see Maria drawing pictures of our family that include you. I see Diego running to you when he gets excited about something. I see you choosing them over million-dollar deals and actually meaning it." She looked up at him with eyes that held years of hurt, but also something new, something that looked like trust. "I see the man I fell in love with 5 years ago, the one I thought had been buried under all that ambition." Marcus moved closer to her on the couch, careful not to crowd her but needing to be near. "He was buried. I buried him because I thought being vulnerable, caring about something more than success would make me weak. But these past few weeks with you and the children, I've remembered what it feels like to be alive." "Pretty words again," Elena said, but there was less wariness in her voice now. "What happens when the newness wears off? When parenting gets boring or frustrating? When Maria has a temper tantrum in public or Diego won't listen? When I'm tired and cranky and not the woman you fell in love with?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Marcus said simply. "Elena, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I made terrible choices that hurt you and caused me to miss years of Maria's life. But I love you. I never stopped loving you. And I love our daughter more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "And Diego?" Marcus smiled, thinking of the little boy who had accepted him so openly despite having every reason to be cautious about father figures. "Diego is an amazing kid. If you'll let me, I'd like to be the father he deserves too. Not to replace Carlos, but to be the man who stays." Elena was crying now, tears she had been holding back for weeks. "I'm scared, Marcus. I'm scared to trust you with our hearts again. I'm scared to believe that you've really changed, but I'm also scared to walk away from what we could have together." "Then don't walk away," Marcus said, reaching for her hands. "Stay. Not as my guest, not temporarily, but as my family. Marry me, Elena. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that I finally understand what matters." "Marriage didn't work out so well for me the last time," Elena said, but she didn't pull her hands away. "Because you married someone who ran away when things got hard. I'm not running anywhere. I'm done running." Elena looked around the penthouse that had seemed so cold when she first entered it, but now felt warm with the presence of her children's laughter and artwork on the refrigerator, and toys scattered on the expensive rugs. This life, Marcus, it's so different from what I thought I wanted. The money, the luxury, I was always afraid it would change me, make me forget what really matters. Money doesn't have to change you, Marcus said. I let it change me, but that was my choice. We can use it differently. We can use it to help people, to make sure Maria and Diego have every opportunity they deserve. To give back to families like yours who are struggling the way you were. What do you mean? Marcus had been thinking about this for days, watching Elena's face whenever she saw homeless families on the street, seeing how she always wanted to help, even when she had nothing to give. I mean, we start a foundation. We help families who are facing the same challenges you faced. We make sure no child has to sleep on the street the way Maria and Diego almost did. Elena stared at him, seeing a future she had never dared to imagine. You would really want to do that? I want to do whatever makes you happy, whatever helps our family make a difference in the world. Our family, Elena repeated, as if testing how the words sounded. Our family, Marcus confirmed. You, me, Maria, and Diego, together. The next morning, Marcus was awakened by small hands shaking his shoulder. He opened his eyes to find Maria standing beside his bed, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Mommy said you asked her to marry you, Maria said with the seriousness that only a 4-year-old could bring to such a momentous topic. Yes, I did, Marcus said, sitting up and giving her his full attention. Does that mean you'll be my real daddy? I'm already your real daddy, Marcus said gently. I always was, even when I didn't know about you. But yes, if your mommy says, yes, it means we'll all be a family together forever. Maria considered this gravely. Will you leave like Daddy Carlos did? Never, Marcus said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. I promise you, Maria, I will never leave you, or your mommy or Diego, not ever. Maria smiled then, the first completely unguarded smile she had ever given him. Good, because I drew you a picture, and I want you to keep it forever. She handed him a drawing done in crayon on expensive art paper he had bought for her. It showed 4 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a sun shining overhead and flowers in the yard. At the bottom, in careful preschool letters, she had written, My family. Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he looked at the picture. Here was everything he had ever wanted. Everything he had been too blind to see when he had it before. Not success or money or recognition, but this, a child's drawing that showed him where he belonged. I'll keep it forever, he promised. I'll put it in a special frame and hang it in my office so everyone knows what's most important to me. 2 months later, Marcus Rivera was featured on the cover of Business Weekly magazine. But this time, the article wasn't about his latest deal or his company's stock price. It was about his new foundation, started with his wife Elena, and dedicated to helping homeless families get back on their feet. The photo showed Marcus in his office, but instead of awards or expensive art, the wall behind his desk was covered with children's drawings, including Maria's picture of their family, framed in gold and holding the place of honor. The article mentioned that Rivera had stepped back from day-to-day operations of his company to focus on his foundation and his family. When asked if he missed the adrenaline rush of big business deals, Rivera was quoted as saying, I found something better than adrenaline. I found purpose. At home that evening, Elena read the article aloud while Marcus helped Maria and Diego with their homework. When she finished, she looked at her husband with the same love she had felt 5 years ago, but deeper now, strengthened by watching him choose their family over and over again. Any regrets? She asked. Marcus looked around at his life. His daughter explaining her math problems to him, his stepson practicing reading aloud, his wife smiling at him from across their kitchen table, and smiled. Only one, he said. I regret that it took me so long to realize that the best deal I ever made was falling in love with you. Outside, The city sparkled with lights from thousands of windows. But inside their home, the Rivera family had found something worth more than all the money in the world. They had found each other.